This is a podcast by the News Minute, and you are listening to South Central.
Hello and welcome to South Central, a TNM podcast where we put South at the center. I am Dhanya Rajendran, your host, and we are recording this show on the 18th of December at 12 p.m. In this week's South Central, we look at Atul Subhash's suicide and the problematic claims around it. We'll also discuss the 5 maternal deaths in Karnataka and why our drug control system is completely broken. Joining me in the studio is Pooja Prasanna, my colleague and the reporting head of the News Minute.
Hello, I'm back.
Also joining us in the studio is Madhu Bhushan. She's an independent activist, writer and researcher. She's worked with many organizations like Vimochana and is now with Gamana. Welcome, Madhu.
Hi, Dhanya. Thanks for having me.
Also joining us in the studio is Dr. Swathi SB. Swathi is a public health practitioner and a medical doctor. She's a co-founder of Action for Equity. She works with many community-based organizations and health movements in Karnataka. Welcome, Swathi.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And joining us from Mumbai is my dear friend Geeta Seshu. She's a journalist, activist, researcher, lots of hats. Geeta, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So, quick announcements. The first thing is that this show is available on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. So do go and follow. It does not take any money. So make sure you do that right after the show and you send it to others because it's primarily a podcast, right? So do follow South Central on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and other podcast platforms. And it's the end of the year, the entire year. All my young colleagues, I'm actually the oldest in office perhaps, have been doing a lot of important stories. And that's because they believe that those stories matter for people out there, for people like you. So the question that we want to ask is, do we matter to you? If we do, then do become a paid subscriber of the News Minute. We do not take advertisements from corporates or political parties, though that's the really easy way out. We depend on subscribers. So go there, become a paid subscriber. Pooja, the headlines.
Biomedical waste from Kerala dumped in Tamil Nadu. Officials dodge accountability. This is basically from two primary centers, a regional cancer center, which is a government state-run hospital, and also a hospital specializing in IVF. Now, the worrying part is that both from a cancer institute and IVF center, the medical waste is extremely dangerous.
And this has been going on for years. Waste coming from Kerala to Tamil Nadu and even to Karnataka.
Yes.
And we have investigated this so many times even FIR is not registered properly. The real culprit is never found. Yesterday, in fact, we went to RCC and asked, and they said, sorry, we give our waste to some other agency. The agency is like, we do not know. So you can go and read that story in the in the Tamil Nadu and Kerala sections. But the Kerala government has to do something. They cannot continue to allow hospitals to dump biomedical waste in other states.
And just to give an idea of how dangerous this is, I remember in Karnataka, outside of Bengaluru many years ago, I had gone to cover Mandur, Mavalli, these landfills. And there was some biomedical waste and I happened to step on it, though I was properly equipped with shoes and all that. For about 10-15 days, I had high fever and I was really unwell. And you imagine the people who are working there, right, with like no safety equipment. Imagine what they go through. Next headline, beyond Bengaluru, government to set up ready-to-use factory spaces for electronics textile parks in North Karnataka. The proposed economic corridor between Bidar and Bengaluru will boost the development for Kalyana Karnataka. The next one, protests erupt at University of Kerala as SFI breaches security during governor's visit. Shortly after Arif Mohammad Khan arrived at the Senate Hall for a seminar, SFI activists forcibly entered the campus by breaking open locked main gate. This is something I think students have been doing wherever he's been going the last few. Moving to Hyderabad, the child injured in the Pushpa 2 stampede suffers brain damage. Sri Teja, the 8-year-old boy injured at the stampede in Hyderabad Sandhya Theatre, this was about 2 weeks ago. He has now suffered brain damage and this is because of a lack of oxygen supply.
Nothing more to say, but I wonder if Tollywood will make a beeline to meet that family. I thought it was quite a sad spectacle that they were lining up outside Allu Arjun's house as if he has been a freedom fighter and he's come back after a freedom fight. He got bail. Yes, you can call him and say, okay, brother, you're back home. But I thought that whole gesture of one by one, them coming and hugging him while this child is lying in the hospital was just unwanted.
He was also there in jail for like half a day or something. So Adani deal under US bribery scrutiny was approved against officials' advice. So apparently a lot of warnings were ignored, and there were, of course, a lot of procedural lapses also. And there's a good chance that the deal will be scrapped now by the Naidu government. This is my favorite. From January 1st, FIR to be lodged against people giving alms to beggars in Indore. There has been a directive issued. So if you don't like slums, just cover them up, right? If you don't like beggars on your streets, don't talk about rehabilitation and all that. Just penalize giving alms to people.
Oh my God.
Emergency 1975 was a mistake, but what about the continuing undeclared emergency today? Asks Singhvi. This is the last headline, but I think it's extremely important because Congress is on record in Parliament accepting that 75 was a mistake, not that they need to.
Okay, so we'll move to our discussion today. The first is the suicide of Atul Subhash, a 34-year-old techie who was living in Bengaluru. Now, to those watching or listening, you may wonder, why are we taking this up after 2 weeks? It was deliberate. I wanted to see how this whole thing plays out, both in the media and social media, and then sort of formulate our thoughts and bring some nuanced perspectives on the debate, because there is no point jumping the gun and adding to the chaos, right? You either serve one echo chamber or the other, which is why I wanted to see for a few days as to how it is panning out. So, most of you are aware of what happened. Atul Subhash died by suicide. He left a suicide note, a very long suicide note, and he also recorded a video which is almost for 1 hour, in which he has accused his wife, Nikita Singhania, and her family of harassing him in multiple ways, including asking money. Nikita and her family have been arrested by the Bengaluru police. One important thing is that a major part of what Atul Subhash was talking about was also how a judge in Allahabad was asking for bribe, and that people in that judge's chamber were also asking for bribe for settlement. Basically, he said that this much alimony was demanded from me, and the judge said that if you want to settle, then give me this much bribe. We did ask the Bengaluru police. In fact, we have put out a story 2 days ago in the News Minute where we asked them, why have you not taken a case against the judge? Even if you need sanction to prosecute, have you done that? So the police officer told us that they will investigate all angles. It is not that they will not investigate the judiciary. So we will keep following up on that. So before we go to our guests, I just want to look at what are the demands and the claims which are being made. Almost every TV channel has given carpet bombing coverage of this entire thing. And a lot of things have been said on these TV channels, a lot of demands and claims. I'm going to read out a few of them. The first is that laws are gender biased. We need gender neutral laws. The second, a lot of men die by suicide. 3, lakhs of men are suffering. Too much alimony is demanded. 5th, a dying declaration is the truth. And finally, lawyers ask women to file 498A, which is domestic violence, to bargain for maintenance. That 498A is highly misused, and there is a low conviction rate for 498A. So we'll go into all this. But first, I just want to examine, I've just come with some data. I'll read that out first and then come to each of you. So one of the primary claims being made is that a lot of men die by suicide in India. Now, that is true. A lot of men do die by suicide in India. In fact, more men die by suicide in India than women. So that statistic is very much there. But what does that really mean? Now, in TV channel debates, people are trying to say that more men die by suicide because they are victims of women. Now, is that really true? We went through the statistics. My colleagues Azifa Fatima and Shivani Kawa have written down all the data which comes through the National Crime Record Bureau. They put down the data between 2015 and 2022. What did they find? 809,000 men died by suicide between 2015 and 22, and 346,500 women died, which means less women are dying by suicide and more men are dying by suicide. There are, of course, more nuances to it. Men use lethal methods, so there is more chance of a man dying by suicide than women, but let's not get into all of that. So it's 8 lakh men and 346,000 women, right? Now, when the NCRB puts out data about suicides, there are different causes. Now, what are the different causes? Bankruptcy or indebtedness, marriage-related issues, that has 5 subsections, Then there is failure in examination, impotency or infertility, family problems. Family problems is different from marriage related problems. Illness, death of dear person, drug abuse, alcohol addiction, fall in social reputation, hero worshipping, love affairs, poverty, unemployment. There are around 14 to 15 causes which the NCRB puts out, right? So we have to look at marriage related problems. Now, within marriage related, there are many subsections, including non settlement of marriage, dowry, extramarital affairs, divorce, and other reasons. So, out of 8 lakh men and 3,46,000 women, 26,588 men died due to marriage problems, and 33,480 women died due to marriage problems. So, more number of women died due to this marriage related problems. So, when you do hear statistics on TV channels or being said by somebody, remember that that's only half the picture. We do have a problem of men and women dying by suicide. We need to address those problems, but that is not because women are standing against them or it's just because of false cases. There are so many reasons why, right? Poverty, farmer suicides, everything is included here. So I just wanted to put out that statistic before we move into the other sections. So I feel that deliberately a confusion is being created that, oh, look, men are dying by suicide a lot. Therefore, it has to do with marriage, dowry harassment, or or the 498A law. Therefore, let us just take away all these laws, right? What do you think about this, Madhu?
Well, thank you, Dhanya, for really putting together, I think, doing the hard work of putting together all that data, because I think there is a lot of data that is floating around that's really being used to bolster this argument that, there is a misuse of the law. And of course, in popular, in social media, it's not just misuse of law, but also how women are becoming more greedy and grasping, and this whole narrative that is really being pushed in the media that paints women out to be such
Gold diggers.
Gold diggers, yes, gold diggers. And yes, as a women's rights activist, who's been around in this field for more than 4 decades, this is nothing unusual, I want to say. This kind of backlash, it is nothing unusual. It's a backlash that we have been facing ever since we started talking about this issue, which was in the late 70s and in the early 80s. Because I think, unfortunately, society has always been and will continue to be in denial over the existence of this kind of violence, patriarchal violence that exists in our society and within our own, everyday homes and practices. So I do think, yes, we have released a statement from Naveddu Nilididre, which is a network of, organizations working on gender and human rights and social justice issues. And we have, of course, we empathize with what Atul Subhash has gone through. We empathize with for us, figures don't matter. Really, data really doesn't matter. It is the death of any, individual, I think, is something that we need to, which should push us to think about what's happening. And, and what really struck us as very tragic is that, one, the way that, Atul's death, Atul Subhash might have been going through his own distress. And so the way he's expressed himself, his anger and all of that, set that aside. I don't even want to respond to it, because he's obviously been in a lot of, under a lot of mental pressure, because of which he's taken his own life. But to kind of use that, by organizations and the media and, including, I think there have been responses even from political, leaders, to use that to kind of bolster an argument that says that all laws related to women are being misused is, I think, a bit of a jump. And I think it indicates that society is still not willing to accept that violence against women continues despite the existence of all these laws. And the other issue that bothers us, is of course this total ignoring of everyday patriarchal violence, which I think is obvious to all of us. I think each one of us, if we look, inside our own homes and in our neighborhoods, we will come across the lives of so many women who are living deaths. They might not be committing suicide. Leave suicides and murders for the moment. That is an issue in itself. But there are thousands of women who are going through living death every day in their homes who don't speak. Sometimes they might speak up, but then they go back into that violence because they feel that they have no choice. So there are women who are living with this violence with no choice, without recourse to the police, without recourse to the courts. So when they say that women are misusing these laws, we also need to see what percentage of women who are facing violence actually go to the police and actually go to the courts, and who are the women who are going there. Okay, so I think a lot of, if you want to talk data, then please do a thorough study of this. So that is one concern. The second concern is that all these reports which are coming, they don't, of course, it's a fact, as you have very clearly pointed out, that more numbers of men are committing suicide. It is an issue of concern. It should be an issue of concern to all of us. So there are huge pressures on men that need to be addressed in a very systemic way. It is also a mental health issue. Why is it not being addressed as a mental health issue?
So, Geeta, I just want to come to the reason why I read out the data in the beginning is that there is, of course, a concern that a lot of men are dying by suicide. The data does show that. The only thing I wanted to ensure that people should understand is that what are the causes behind the death, right? Now, everybody is making it seem like men are dying because women are filing false cases against them. That is not what the statistics tell us. And these are government statistics. Geeta, so while the conversation should be around the mental health of men, how can we ensure that patriarchal systems don't get to them? Are we always diluting this into a women versus men binary?
Yeah, I think, yeah, Dhanya, thanks for having me on this. I'm just trying to look at, the number of years that we have been tackling this entire issue. And like Madhu said, the manner in which this entire case has been played out is something that we're not unfamiliar with. And this organizations, men's rights organizations that have been trying to do this have been raising these issues for several years now, and have basically been attacking the law, which they feel very threatened by. Whether it was 498A earlier, and whether it is the new sections in the BNS, basic law is what they have been attacking, and saying that this law gives women undue advantage to harass men, and that ends up making them seem as if it's a men versus women issue. But if you look at what Madhu has been speaking, and Madhu has worked on this, and her the organizations that she's been working with has done this for several years now. The women's groups have consistently talked about violence, about patriarchy, about society. They have not only they have not ever, in fact, I can't recall any instance where the women's organizations have made men into the culprits or men into the enemies. There's not been any of that kind of discussion or narrative at all. It's always been about how society operates, how patriarchy works in the family, and how outside the family, how the law and judicial systems and law enforcing agencies then help in making women much more vulnerable. And we've dealt with innumerable cases. I started looking at this in 1987 when I did a very detailed analysis of what used to be called dowry deaths then. And that, that brings me to a point that I wanted to speak of earlier, but I'll say it right now. The way in which the media then picks on certain catchwords and then goes on about it without any kind of in-depth analysis. I mean, it's so superficial. Even the use of the word dowry deaths, which all of us, when we were journalists in the 80s, also used, without that kind of understanding that this was not only about dowry or about, property, or about getting, making the dowry demands and making more and more demands. It was about misogyny. It was really about how women were treated, how women were harassed for not cooking properly, not looking good, not having a very long nose. I mean, there was one woman whose nose was chopped off because she was seen as being too proud because she was beautiful, and her nose was seen as a sign of beauty. I mean, we've had so many instances of the worst kind of violence against women. So these kind of things have happened and continue to happen. How does our law help women who want to do something about it? Many women, like Madhu said, don't. They live these lives and they live them quietly, they suffer. But in some cases, women do break out, they do come out to make complaints. And the complaints is about the entire institution that allows it, not really about men versus women.
I wanted to add to what Madhu talked about, how many women don't even place a complaint and there are multiple negotiations after it. So, for example, I accompanied one of the women who was trying to fight a case where she had already won the case as she was a victim of domestic violence, and the court had already placed judgment in her favor. And the alimony money, right? What you said, that the people demand a lot of money, but actually court what had compensated was 25,000 and 3,000 per month for her sustenance, maintenance, and 1,500 for the child. And for 5 years this has been going on. She still didn't get that money, maintenance money, not even once, or even the compensation money was not obtained. And when asked, when she went back to the court to kind of follow up on this, she had to put another case. And in between this, the ex-husband had come to the house and also had assaulted her. And the lawyer had to tell her, you keep this to yourself, do not complain, because then it becomes even more complicated and all of that. And even the police, who's supposed to follow up on in terms of like getting to the person, getting to that man who's supposed to pay for maintenance, the police would put the responsibility on the woman, saying, if you find him, you let us know, I will come and I will speak to him. And a lot of times what happens, there's an arrangement between the police and the man, and so this never gets settled.
Just want to quickly add here. In one case, I remember this case so vividly now. This woman got an order from the court for maintenance. The money had to be deposited in the court. It was deposited in the court, and when she went outside, the man slapped her and took it back. He just beat her and he just snatched the money back.
So I'll come to alimony. I'll just wrap up the suicide number discussion and we'll go to alimony in detail. So all the data that I gave in the beginning, 8 lakh men dying between 2015-22 and 3 lakh odd women. In that, marriage related is 26,000 for men and 33,500 for women. 26,500 for men and 33,500 for women. So we need to first understand that both men and women are suffering. Women are suffering more even in those numbers, right? That's one. Now we go to the alimony.
No, I just want to add on the part of, again, people don't realize that when we talk about alimony, which is what we want to go to, or the other, property, loss of social reputation, all of this is, like she said, patriarchal, right? And it stems from the fact that men are supposed to be the primary breadwinners, right? So when you don't earn enough, when you don't have enough property or you lose your property, farmer suicide is again because men in that setup are the primary breadwinners of the family. And this also comes from the fact that it's not that women are lazy, women are unwilling to work. Women don't get paid because your domestic work is unpaid labor. So these are things that people don't factor in when we talk about alimony. It feels like, women are just demanding money so they can sit at home and not work.
In Atul Subhash's case, the whole thing is that Nikita had demanded 3 crore rupee of alimony. And then he has written that, how do I give this money? Because I only earn, I think, 85,000 per month. And in that, how do I give so much of alimony? And they have continuously asked me for money. So when it comes to alimony, there is the Hindu Marriage Act section 25, which clearly lays down how, in the sense, is there a clear formula for deciding alimony? No, India does not have that formula. But we do have certain things laid down as to how it will be looked at, which is conduct of both the husband and wife. How much income do they have? How much properties do they have? What are the deductions like income tax, EMI, loans, net income, liabilities? All these are calculated, and then the court decides finally what the alimony is, right? Nikita Singhania can ask for 3 crores or 30 crores. But eventually the court has to give that money.
as far as alimony is concerned, I can give you hundreds of cases, okay, which we are handling ourselves, which, where women have to suffer, the worst kind of indignities to get the most paltriest of sums. And there's no guarantee that when a court passes an order that they'll even get that money. Okay. Since you want to talk about alimony later, I just wanted to bring in another point on deaths, because now suicide, death, that has become the kind of worrying concern, right? But it is so tragic that, women's lives are so cheap. Yes, we should get worried about Atul Subhash. But what of those hundreds of women who are just dying these anonymous deaths? Way back in 1997, we had done a study. Police used to normally, close all deaths of women. Women used to die, unnatural deaths. They used to close it as UDRs. They used to just file an unnatural death report and close it, like as if women have just decided to die. I mean, there was nothing that was pushing them. It was not a suicide, or it was not a murder. They were just dying, unnatural death. So we took that issue up and we did a very systematic study. Okay, we collected all the data. We went and tried to meet all those families. And we found, and we had, and then once we collected all that data, we had a meeting with the, DGP, police commissioner at the highest levels. We called for a meeting and we presented all this data and we said, how do you classify? Because these are the stories we got that are behind that. How do you close this as a UDR without investigating it? And then they reopened 700 cases. 700 cases were reopened because, they'd been closed without any investigation. That is the scale that we're talking about. And I don't think those figures have changed remarkably down the years. They haven't changed. So I don't want to make this a deaths of women versus deaths of men, but we have to face up to the fact that women are, greater victims, of domestic violence within the four walls of the house, because that is not something that is taken. So, and to just add to that, how even till today, domestic violence is still it's still normalized. It's very normalized. We also do sensitization of police. Okay, we do a lot of sensitization. Even today, when you do these sensitization programs, the police look at us very skeptically, and they say, oh, ma'am, or, madam, idella, all these are all false cases. And then you have policemen saying, in any case, so what if a man beats his wife? So what? It's a way of keeping her controlled. Otherwise, they go out of control. ಅವಾಗ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಹಿಡಿತದಲ್ಲಿ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡಿರಬೇಕು. So when you have, that is your everyday thinking. So you don't have to have a spectacular death, to kind of prove that violence, this whole violent attitude towards women exists in all our minds. It's legitimized. It's normalized.
The point I was looking at, for every time they say, oh, but men also are victims of domestic violence. But it's not systematic. The violence against women, especially because of dowry, is systemic, which is why it was brought in the first place. So now to say, let's have a gender agnostic law would mean that when there's no level playing field for women in society, it still doesn't exist. Forget when the law was brought in. You cannot have gender, agnostic laws at the end of the day. And for me, I was half amused, half angry at the arguments that we saw around this particular case. I have been warned, I must say, to keep my emotions in check.
And I'm going to ask those journalistic questions, like, Pooja, of course, probably wants to also. But I'm very intrigued by the fact that this man was a member of this organization, Save Indian Family organization, which has been around for a long time and which is extremely unbalanced in the manner in which it deals with the whole issue of domestic violence. It makes women into the enemies. It makes, its entire narrative is very, very misogynistic. And this man has been a member for the last 3 years. The entire video, as well as that note which he wrote, is entirely the language of this Save Indian Family Foundation. If you've seen their website and if you've seen the way they speak, all their various spokespeople, it's eerie. It's very eerie. And I feel there should be some kind of investigation into how much they influenced this poor man's decision to take his own life. I would really like to know. And that is my journalistic question, which I really feel needs to be asked by all those media channels that have been going on and on about this entire issue without bothering to have any kind of empathy or any sensitivity on this entire issue.
Again, this is not to make it a men's versus women's. And I don't think it should also be men's rights organizations versus women's rights organizations. Because we are talking about society. What kind of a society do we want? What kind of families do we want? What kind of marriages do we want? I think that is something that we need to really, address. And I would really like to, I think she raises a very, very pertinent question, because that was also my question, because if this man, Atul, Subhash, had reached out to an organization, I'm glad that he reached out to an organization. The question is, how does that organization then support him? Okay, because I want to say from our own experience, as I've been, like I say, I've been part of women's rights organizations and we've been part of crisis intervention. We have been systematically, from the time that we started our work, which was in the late 70s and early 80s, in the, I was just telling, I was telling you, I think, Dhanya, when we first started, when the women used to come to us, we used to immediately take a very adversarial stand, against the husband, because we felt that the woman, we had to take up on behalf of the woman. But as we started taking up more and more cases of women who started coming to us, we realized that we could not take this adversarial, adversarial kind of approach. We could not, because all said and done, as much as we have a criticism, we have a critique, we have a very strong critique of marriage and the family as a very patriarchal institution in which all these values of misogyny are really nurtured and grown. We have a very strong critique of that. But how do you change it? That for us is the question. You're not just attacking it. How do you change it? And we found that many of the women who were victims of this violence never wanted to go against their husbands. In fact, the classic line, which continues till today, I don't want him to beat me. Ashte, that is a very basic demand. I don't want to leave my husband. I just don't want him to beat me. Okay. Now, as a responsible organization that is there for the support of women, what do we do? Do we pump her up and say, no, put a case against that man, take him to court? No, we sit with her, we talk to her, we engage not only with her, we not only empathize with her, we also engage with her husband. I want to ask all these organizations, how much do they engage with the women? How much? And we've done the hard work, we've done the hard work of not only engaging with the men, but we also have, in terms of the use and misuse of the law, at every stage we have, because we use the law. I mean, in the sense we are engaging with the law, we also see where it can go wrong. For example, to give you a history of the Domestic Violence Act. How did the Domestic Violence Act come about? Because, there had been 498A, which criminalized domestic violence, which was necessary because there was no law that had criminalized domestic violence. So that was absolutely necessary. But we also realized that many women were not, forget misuse, they were not willing to use the law. Okay, because it criminalized the husband, it put them in jail. We've had cases where, there was one woman who'd been beaten up black and blue, and we took her, and it was not just a one-off incident. The man had been, and he was a highly placed, he was a manager in a bank, in a public sector bank, and so was she. Okay. And he used to really beat her up. He used to close the doors. He used to put on the radio loudly and beat her up. And then we used to keep telling her, let's go to the police. She refused. And one day it was very, very bad. And we took her to the commissioner. And we said a case has to be put. And the commissioner was also very incensed. And he called the police and he said, bring him. And she started howling her head off. She says, please don't put a case on him. So this is, women are negotiating with their lives out there on the line every day. So why can't, till the very bitter end, even in, we worked in Victoria Hospital Burns ward. My colleagues still do. Earlier when I was part of Vimochna, now they continue to work there. And I can tell you hundreds of cases where women who've been burnt by their husbands, even in their dying declaration, they do not blame the husband. They do not blame the husband. Because they, what their rationale is? They say that what will happen to my children?
And in fact, I know of one, I remember in one instance, this woman was burnt, and when you're in the hospital, I don't know how many of you all have been there, but they put them in this kind of a tent because they can't put any clothes on them, because they can't even, there is no flesh which is not burnt. They're sometimes so badly burnt. And it's only towards the very end when they feel that, okay, they are actually going to die, that some of them do give that dying declaration and say that the husband burnt them. Otherwise, they'll always say it's an accident. And stove burst, I mean, we've seen enough of those. Enough.
So I'm going to now move to 498A misuse. But before that, I want to close the debate on alimony itself. While Nikita Singhania Geeta could have asked for money, which is 3 crores, and perhaps there are a lot of women who think this is a way to fleece men and they do ask for disproportionate amounts. Again, my whole problem is highlighting one case to say that everybody is trying to fleece their husbands is also sort of not taking into consideration all those women who are so dependent on these maintenance amounts on this alimony, right?
See, if it's anecdotal, I can give you a number of anecdotes about how men do not even disclose their full income. I have a friend, and this is a friend whose husband did not even disclose that he had 2 houses, and this has happened. So we do have instances where the law is, and the law enforcing agencies and the judiciary and everybody else don't investigate sufficiently whether men have the capacity to pay or not. And in some cases, the entire question of whether it is justified, unjustified, or whether it is too much or too little, what the family's assets are, how men hive off their assets very quickly. If we are talking about anecdotes, I'll give you anecdotes, lots of anecdotes. There's another case of a woman who I know, and I know her personally, and this is from a very upper crust background, where the husband just removed her name from all the joint accounts, and she had to really scramble to get some money. She had nothing. She used to travel by bus finally, because when, and invariably when women are when there are instances of the breakup of a marriage, the economic condition of women plummets. It just collapses, and people don't seem to understand all those things. So we have to look at the larger social implications of of this entire marriage, and how marriage breaks down, and the kind of violence within marriage, the kind of economic status of women, how women are lumped with children and they have to take care of them because the husband just doesn't bother. They just walk away. So if we're talking anecdotes, we'll give you lots of anecdotes. But it's not going to help. Really, what we need is to look at a much more holistic way of dealing with a major social problem.
No, my grouse is that an anecdote, which is Atul Subhash's death, is being used to project a much say that this is a bigger problem, right? While it may have happened to him, it does not happen to everyone else. That's what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely, it doesn't. And while it doesn't happen to everyone else, we can also give you counter anecdotes. So this war will not end. This kind of war will not end, one anecdote versus the other. The issue is, how do you deal with anything with fairness?
There is a lot of discussion about the misuse of 498A, which is domestic violence. Now, that's something which even women's organizations have spoken about, how 498A can be misused by police and the lawyers. Could you tell us what your stand has been over the years?
It has been precisely that don't individualize it. Because see, for women to access formal justice is a difficult process. Like, not many women, first of all, go. And when they go, nor are they acquainted. I mean, you can't expect a woman, who maybe a upper, class woman, or who's a more privileged woman who reads and goes on the net and kind of looks at things, will know about the law and what she's entitled to, etc. Whereas most women will just go to the station to say that, look, my husband is beating me up and I want this to stop. Okay, it's a very simple kind of a thing. So what happens is that what we have to question, which I think Geeta also had raised earlier, is the systemic misuse of the law. Okay, and this is something that we have constantly also encountered to say, don't mix up, for example, simple things. Okay, police will immediately, what they used to do, and I think they still continue to do, is conflate 498A with the Dowry Prohibition Act. Okay, because they say that if you have to prove, like, dowry is a much more stringent in their heads. Okay, they think that, one, they don't accept the wider definition of, domestic violence. That domestic violence can be, physical, it can be sexual, it can be economic, it can be emotional, but not all these forms of violence are recognized. So either it has to be physical or it has to be extractive, it has to be economic. So what is the economic form of violence? You say we'll put up, the Dowry Prohibition Act. Now, Dowry Prohibition Act has some very stringent kind of, in order to prove dowry, rightfully so, there are certain, provisions. Obviously, those don't stand up in a court of law. So then the case falls once it comes up in the courts, and then you say, see, that's because it was a false case. Who made the case false? Was it the woman or was it the system? Okay. And secondly, the other issue is that domestic violence today has become very lucrative business, in the courts. This is no offense to lawyers. Best friends are lawyers.
Let them take offense. It's
But
fine.
yes, but the fact is, when I go to the family court today, I am astounded at the number of cases that are there and the way the cases are it's like a marketplace. And when I think back of 30 years ago, I want to cry, because when we first, kind of demanded for the family court, we had this idyllic notion, very utopian notion of the family court, where there'd be this love. I want to actually dig out, we had done a kind of representation that we presented also in Vedant Saud, I remember, where we said this is how the family court should function. It should be non-adversarial. There should be no lawyers. Women, the space should be there for the women to talk. There must be, there must be space for children to play around. I don't know what world we were living in. Okay, we had this nice, nice music playing in the background. But then,
Madhu, if you remember, I wrote about that first family court,
yes,
which happened in Karnataka.
And we had done, we went inside one of the family courts and we did a protest saying lawyers, because initially lawyers were not supposed to be there. Okay. And we said, we did a protest in the family court saying lawyers should not be allowed, that they should be more mediated, negotiated, another kind of atmosphere, because here people have suffered. So how do you deal with this kind of personalized suffering, which is also structural for the women? So that was our idyllic dream. But today it's become like a marketplace. So domestic violence is, today marital disputes are the ones that give lawyers maximum money. So will it not be in their interest to,
so you're saying
plump
they
up the state?
randomly add sections. They
randomly add sections. They, they incite the woman to say, ask for more. So it's not as if it's in the woman's hands at all. Okay. So on the one hand, the police will, put faulty sections which will not stand up in the court of law. And then you have lawyers who are most extractive, for whom marital issues are the prime. It's like it's number one. It tops the charts of, what money you can get. So those are the stakes in it. So when the stakes are against the woman in every which way. So today, if the laws are being misused, don't look at the woman. Look at the way the system is misusing it and address that. It's right. In Atul Subhash's case, if you look through what I read through, half of his complaint was against the judge. Because she has demanded for bribes, and I'm not surprised, because that is a system that has worked against the woman. Here, when women go to courts, not only do they have to pay the police, they have to pay the lawyers, they have to pay the judges, every which way. You have the legal aid services, even legal aid, which is supposed to be there for poor women. You think those lawyers will do any service free? I wish they would. But even those have to be paid. So it is a business. Today, marital issues are big business. So please, let's dismantle that.
When we talk about the misuse of 498A, that has been well documented. The Arnesh Kumar guidelines were brought in 2014 because the Supreme Court felt that men are being arrested without proper proof or even a preliminary investigation, which is why the Arnesh Kumar guidelines came in. Then at many points, the Supreme Court has looked at the misuse of 498A. But Geeta, if we turn this debate on its head, from what Madhu said, you are setting up women for failure when you actually misuse 498A, right? For example, a woman goes with a complaint, you add multiple sections to it, and eventually there can be no conviction in that case because you have set up that woman for failure by misusing the law.
It's a it's a huge problem, and you see this kind of thing in many cases. It's not just in cases about women. The justice delivery system really does not work. And it's not 498 anyway now. We have to start calling it 85 and 86 of the BNS. But really, it's this edifice, like Madhu said, which we have to dismantle in some way, because we are not getting justice. And if justice is not coming to anybody, then we have to rethink how this is happening. Not by what the media has been crying for and what the men's rights groups have been going on about, which is to change the law into something which is gender neutral. No, it is to make the law effective in such a way that it works for women and it works for men too if they need to. And there are laws for men.
The very argument that if a law is being misused, then it needs to go is so problematic. And we hear this in so many cases, right? Atrocities Act, we keep saying, oh, people take advantage, so it has to go. It's being misused. The same can be said of attempt to murder. It can be said in accident cases. You have to fix the loopholes, not ask for the law to go.
No. I'm sorry, Pooja, let's stop a little there. We have talked about the laws like sedition, for instance, which have been misused. But our argument is not about the misuse about the law. Our argument is really about the ideology of that law. So here we are saying that this particular law has a rationale, and it has a very specific rationale for a very specific issue which our country faces. And it is an issue of violence against women. So if there is this kind of a rationale, then if the rationale itself does not exist, and if there is no need for something like this, then the law does not need to exist. But there's a law which is very specifically made there for a very specific reason.
No, for example, when it comes to sexual violence, the Justice Verma Commission did say that we can look at gender neutral laws. I was reading this interview where Vrinda Grover says that, in fact, I spoke to her yesterday. She said it should be gender specific laws when it comes to sexual violence, not gender neutral, but gender specific. That's what a lot of people like Karuna Nandi and everybody has been asking, right? Gender specific laws. But when it comes to dowry and when it comes to domestic violence, like Geeta says, there's a rationale why the law is there, which is precisely why it cannot be made gender neutral.
Yeah, when the crime is not gender neutral, when the crime is gender specific, how can the recourse be gender neutral to it? I don't see, at least in Hindu society, there's no concept of dowry for a man. So how can you have that? How can that be gender neutral?
So there is a rationale, an ideology, and a need for the law. Just saying in news studios that remove the law itself or make it gender neutral is not going to help. And that's not the point. I want to quickly end 2-3 minutes only on the media coverage of this. What really appalled me was that I was looking at YouTube channels of various media houses, and they have, I'm talking about huge, big channels, the biggest channels in the country, have all put out the entire 1 hour suicide note on their YouTube channels. And each of those videos have 2 to 3 million views. All the language people have done it with subtitles. I mean, imagine the kind of work which goes into subtitling 1 hour video. But everybody has done that. So there are millions of people watching a suicide note, which itself goes against every guideline of suicide reporting, right? There are very few times when we put out suicide notes. When, for example, in Rohit Vemula case, his letter was put out quite a bit because there was a system to be questioned, the cases not being registered against the ministers. So the media has a lot of guidelines, right, Pooja?
Absolutely. And it's a context. You cannot have, this is not a black and white, it's not binary, right? And like you said in Rohit Vemula case, it was important to highlight the systemic issues that he had written about. Here, I think there is also some sort of perverse curiosity, and that is what is disturbing. Number one. Number two, it could lead to copycat suicides, right?
That's another concern. I think this itself is a copycat suicide, because a few months ago, there was a man from Kerala. He was living abroad. He died almost the same way. He also made an elaborate video of what happened, and he recorded that. That also was put out by all these groups. And then comes Atul Subhash. This is in English, so I think it got watched more and circulated more. But there was a similar video which had made its rounds in Kerala. There was a lot of anger over it. So I believe this itself is a copycat suicide.
And it's not contextualized, right? When they put this out, they don't have counselors on their panel talking about how to deal with such emotions. They do not, have any mental health experts. They just put it out, and that's it, right? And in a sense, what they're doing is they're trying to kind of invoke emotions against the family and against women and feminism. I was watching, I don't even want to get into some of the regional languages, but just look at the line of questioning, look at the choice of experts. It's not because there is a lack of experts, it's because they have a certain line. And very responsibly, I want to add that this happened in Bangalore. He was an IT professional, and that has, in a way, kind of dictated how the coverage happens. We've all been part of those newsrooms, and we know that that is the primary reason why it's being covered the way it is.
The media has to be much, much more sensitive in the way it puts out all of this. It has to contextualize. But when has the media done this? And for me, the question is, why are some channels putting this out so much without this kind of context and without the kind of sensitivity and empathy it needs? Why are these channels doing it? For me, the answer is really about how they gain a lot of currency by this kind of coverage. So there's really no interest in that poor chap, this Atul, or in his condition and his family's condition or anything like that. This is just great for that channel's business. And that is really the one huge tragedy of this already tragic incident.
When you look at especially the local channels, the vernacular channels, it is, I don't even have a word to describe it, because it's like they were waiting for a case like this to happen, so that their own, their own insecurities can be then projected on. Look at the kind of headline. For me, it's nothing short of hate speech against women. It's, the kind of headlines, what greed is, something hangs so, like she's this greedy, grasping, the language that is used is really, it's a way of inciting hatred. So is this not going to feed then back into the existing kind of, misogyny and patriarchy that is there? Now, every man who's beating his wife will feel justified. As it is, there is a social approval. Now there's going to be a double approval of this. So where are we going by spreading this kind of hate against women?
Everybody on the panel agrees that yes, the law is misused, like a lot of laws are misused, but that's a problem with the system. What we have to correct is system and not ask for the law to be scrapped or have gender neutral laws, because there is a reason why these laws are there. There is an ideology and rationale behind the laws. There are a lot of men in India who are dying by suicide. A lot of women are also dying by suicide, perhaps lesser in number. We do have a problem at hand, and that has to be addressed. Why are these people dying by suicide? Whether it's illness, whether it's farmer suicides, whatever it is, let us address that instead of putting everything in one basket as to this is all marriage related or this is all because of women, right? So thank you, Geeta, for joining this discussion, and we'll move on to the next one. The second topic I want to look at is the deaths, the maternal deaths which have happened in the Bellary government hospital, where 5 women died. And there's been a lot of debate around what has happened. There was an IV fluid called Ringer's lactate, which was given to them. The whole finding now is that that medicine was not of standard quality. In fact, in January this year, that medicine had been blacklisted by the Karnataka government because their labs had found out that this medicine was not of standard quality, but it came back to the hospitals because the court lifted it. This company, which is Paschim Banga Pharmaceuticals, went to the court. They had other lab reports, including from the CDL, which is the Central Drugs Laboratory, which is the appellate authority. So basically, if a state finds that your medicine is not of standard quality, the company which makes the medicine can then go for an appeal and get a report from CDL, which is the appellate authority. In this case, the CDL cleared this medicine, which is why it is back in Karnataka, and now 5 women have died. So Dr. Swathi works on this. Can you tell us what exactly is going wrong here? Is it because we do not have a clear system in place where if a medicine is not of standard quality, immediate punishment is given, or there's a proper system of blacklisting?
So I think these maternal deaths, whatever happened in Ballari, should be seen in the context of the larger issue of how drugs are being controlled or even regulated in our country. And so, at one level, if we see Karnataka, we are also at the same time we'll have to see it at the large scale in the country how it's happening. So from the manufacturing till reaching to somebody in the hospital, to a patient, there's a lot of process that is happening right within manufacturing companies also. And there are a lot of control measures or regulatory measures that have been put in place for that. So even from the Drugs and Cosmetics Act 1940 itself has clearly laid out the necessary requirements. And at the central level, if we see, we have the central drug standard control organization, basically, which will take responsibility to kind of give licensing or going through any manufacturing companies which they have to bring out new drugs into the market. It has to go through this organization. Under this central organization, every state has its state drug control departments. Now there are two parallel things happening when a drug is supposed to be in distribution. One is at the manufacturing level, each state will have to each state's drug control department have to ensure that the manufacturing companies within their state are manufacturing with proper guidelines and standards. And so certification of that, like clinical trials, even manufacturing companies have good manufacturing practices that they'll have to adhere to. And if that is not being adhered to, then we can only imagine what kind of drugs can come out of such manufacturing companies. Now what goes on is, one, the state drug control has to check at the source itself in this manner. But on the other hand, there's a lot of focus given to quality testing after it has come into market. So what the drug control department does is random testing from pharmacies to and these so obviously if it's a random testing, all batches or all companies, all drugs, all of them won't get tested. So it's a handful of drugs that are getting tested every month. And it puts out what the quality is coming out, whether as standard quality or not for standard quality. uh, and so if only a handful are being tested, and within that a not for standard quality is coming out, that only tells us that what might be the conditions in which those companies are manufacturing. So it's almost like we are missing out a lot of drugs, and within that whatever we've tested, proper action needs to be taken.
And in this case, the Karnataka, every district has actually given NSQ for this ringers lactate, right? Almost 5 to 7 districts have given NSQ reports, but still they managed to get
Non-standard quality.
yeah,
for
not
those
standard quality, yeah. But they managed to get a standard quality report from CDL and from a private lab and go to court saying that we can't be blacklisted. So sometimes I feel like Indians are just living on luck.
Yeah, no,
Nothing
I
else.
also there is a larger problem here, and you'll remember, Dhanya, during Project Electoral Bond, how many companies had managed to get clearances after they paid electoral bonds, right? Initially, they will be banned, and then they get clearances. So the system is not transparent. Number one. Number two, I think, especially in government hospitals, about 10-15 years ago, we had done a story on how these government warehouses are procuring drugs that are very close to expiry date because they get it at subsidized prices. And then sometimes they just pass it off because, who will ask questions in a government hospital? Do they even check the expiry date? The second problem is they would change the date, the expiry date, and give it to supply to government hospitals. This is something we'd found. But is that something that you found, that there isn't a proper audit system, especially in government drug warehouses?
So, in terms of government drug warehouses, the kind of procurement, if we take Karnataka state, so there is Karnataka State Medical Supply Corporation Limited, and this has been since 2003 or two, I think. And the procurement, so the drug control department that I said about random testing is for any pharmacy. So that's not limited to government supply at all. But KSMSCL is specifically for procuring pooled procurement for the government facilities, be it a primary health center at a village or up until the district hospitals. And each of these districts will have a drug warehouse, district drug warehouses. And KSMLCL does a pooled procurement. So the tender process is called, and the manufacturing companies directly supply to these district warehouses. What is happening is, one, right after it reaches the drug warehouses, the distribution also starts to the facilities, and at the same time a few samples of these drugs are taken for testing in empaneled laboratories. Now, before the reports come, the drugs are already in use, they are already in the hospitals. So where is the safety being being taken care of? One answer could be that, okay, the manufacturing company have already run their quality testings and they've come up with their certificates. But the issue is also, how well is this certification process happening? Because if we see like today's or yesterday's news, Paschim Banga company has been now said that they can't manufacture, they don't have that standard manufacturing processes. So are they actually doing the necessary visits, quality check within the, before certifying such certain companies, and whether bribery is involved in even certification?
That's what I want to come to, because everything is so ad hoc, right? Like a drug does not get a standard quality certification. It still comes back into the market. It's still there in the hospital. Everything is ad hoc, really. How much time are you punishing a manufacturing company saying, okay, next 6 months you cannot give the drugs, or next 1 year? There's no proper rule on that. And the worst is now the Karnataka government, and I also read an article by experts on the Deccan Herald saying that there is a doubt as to how is the CDL giving these certificates of standard quality, right? That apparently there have been many cases where the CDL has given the certificate, but the drugs have ended up killing people. So are we to also doubt certificates given by labs, that there could be bribery involved?
Yeah, I think in one of the Twitter spaces that I listened to, there was a manufacturing from pharma industry, and he was saying how within a few hours I can get you a NABL certificate for a laboratory with some amount, 4,000, 5,000. And that only tells us like how the certification is going on. Even if it's NABL, say KSMSCN is empaneled with certain NABL laboratories for testing, how good is that NABL accreditation? At the same time, how good is the GMP certification going on? Are they actually getting checked properly to be able to produce the drugs? Because once it's out in the market, like even Dinesh Thakur in his book The Truth Pill, he clearly talks about how once it out in the market, even recalling is not a coordinated process that we have been equipped to. In fact, there's like almost like 60% vacancies in the drug inspector post throughout India, which only tells us, even with this small amount of random testing that is being done, that also is not going to be done efficiently because of how much vacancies are there. And to what level are these processes that are running in parallel coordinated? Like Dhanya said, each month this Paschim Banga products have been testing as not for standard quality in the state drug control department's testing, and these are put out in the website, unlike KSMSCL's website, which is completely not having any information. But is that being coordinated with KSMSCL and its supply, and or even other states? How we are not
that was
aware.
my question I had.
Yeah, so basically, there are multiple labs here itself giving these reports. There's one blacklisting that is lifted, then there are again reports, so no coordination.
Because this is a widely used drug, right? It's given in IV fluids for before, during surgery, after surgery, all of that, right?
Yeah,
So
this is
it's for rehydration, so it's widely used, right?
Yes. So even for any other kinds of surgeries, which is what even Drug Action Forum Karnataka, when we brought out statement, and we also wrote to the committee chair about who's investigating all of this, that this is we are talking about 5 maternal deaths, but this is a fluid that is commonly used for anyone who's undergoing surgery, who's dehydrated, and so we'll have to look into what other deaths have been caused due to the same drug. But like I said earlier, I think this has to go beyond Karnataka level. This has to be thought of as how well our drug regulatory system is functioning, because these are not only about maternal deaths, not only about ringer lactate, but how year after year many drugs are being manufactured by multiple companies with not following standard.
In fact, we see that list, right? Like paracetamol by some company has been said of not standard quality. And then it hits people because paracetamol is something that almost everybody uses, not like Ringer's lactate is being used by people, right? But despite that, that company will be back in the list manufacturing the same medicine, right? Is the problem also that the pharma industry is too powerful, is too full of money, and therefore gets its way around?
Yeah. I think I would also like to add, while we look at this larger regulatory system, I certainly feel that the Karnataka government should take strict action and measures against KSMSCL, because in a way they are supposed to have a foolproof system so that the drug doesn't get into the system, into the government warehouses, or even if they are in the government warehouses, before they are actually given to the patients, the standard quality have to be checked. In fact, Tamil Nadu Medical Supply Corporation has this quarantine thing where they keep those drugs in the warehouse until the test reports are arrived, so that only then they can be supplied. And moreover, there is absolute no transparency. Like all of this testing that KSMSCL is undergoing through empaneled NABL laboratories, none of them are being um, shared anywhere. We don't know how much of testing is happening. We don't know the tender process, whether that is transparent. All of these are actually has to be taken care of.
So the Drug Action Forum has actually made a list of the maternal deaths which have happened. And that's not only in Bellary. It happened in Davanagere. It has happened in Chitradurga, many other districts. And it's all connected to substandard ringers lactate. But still, there has been no proper investigation. We just go from event to event to event. Like I said, Indians are almost living due to luck. Before we go to recommendations, Pooja, I understand half the stuff she's saying, including the words, because I've been a health reporter. I was a health
This
reporter
was just
for
Dhanya's way of plugging it.
yeah, I was a health reporter for 1 year. So all this GMP and all that, without you saying the full form, I actually know it.
I was trying to guess what could it possibly
Yeah.
be.
So okay, so we come to an end of the show. We'll quickly go to the recommendations. Madhu, what is your recommendation for the week?
Well, I would recommend the book that I'm currently reading, which is Bride in the Hills by Kuvempu, which has been translated by Vanamala Vishwanath. And I think it's a fantastic book. I think for Karnataka, I think it's really, and to have somebody like Kuvempu writing, like this, the way he did in his time, I think was just fabulous. Talking about the impact of the whole, interaction between, local cultures and global cultures, and the thing between the whole issue of caste, patriarchy, how it engages in the coming of the church. It is just so fabulously done. I think I would really recommend everyone.
I'm very happy somebody recommended Kuvempu. But I just started reading Deva Sahayam's new book, Emergency, New Emergency. And I think we should read it, especially in a week when Constitution was discussed so much in Parliament. It also kind of recalls what happened during emergency, but it's also like a cautionary tale for what we should look out for signs of undeclared emergency and how to kind of counter them. You can also watch Watcheurism episode with Deva Sahayam with Sudeep To, and of course Dhanya was also part of that. You'll get context to what he's written in that book.
I would recommend the book Sakina's Kiss by Vivek Shanbhag. It's a translated version from Kannada. A friend, Anusha, gifted it to me. And so the reason I'm recommending this is because it's a very light read, but also makes you think a lot about this person Venkat and the journey he undergoes within the family dynamics. And there's a lot of struggle in the modern world where he wants to think modern, but there's a lot of inbuilt masculinity going on in his mind. So it's a nice way to understand and empathize with someone.
My recommendation is a book called The Idea of India. It's edited by Geeta Hariharan, and it has a wonderful selection of voices, a large number of women who are prominent thinkers and intellectuals speaking about their insights into diversity, dissent, and resistance.
So my recommendation is actually a book which Dr. Swathi did mention in between. It's called A Truth Pill by Dinesh Thakur and Prashant Reddy. It's a fantastic book. Dinesh Thakur, in fact, was a whistleblower in the whole, medical field. But if you are scared of eating medicines already, then I would tell you to exercise caution before reading that, because it tells you how broken the system of drug control, drug production, etc. is in India. So do go ahead and read that book. In fact, my colleague Raga had interviewed, I think, the two authors around a year ago. So that interview also is available on our YouTube. So that's it, a wrap. This week we did not have Leena Raghunath because she was very busy with the Wayanad Lit Fest. I think next week too, she's not going to be there. But we will keep coming back to you. And remember what I said in the beginning, do follow the show on Spotify, Apple, and all other podcast platforms. That does not cost you anything. But what will cost you is a subscription, which is very necessary for organizations like the News Minute, which does not depend on any other advertising revenue. So, do we matter to you? If we do, then do take a subscription. Thanks to everyone, Bhuvan, Ajay, Megha, Vignesh, and Jasim, who are part of the South Central team.